mind just give me a few seconds of you just smile into the camera. So this way we can cut a picture and use it for the header.
Okay, great.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna count us in, give the intro, introduce you, and then give you a few minutes to just talk about yourself. Just tell everybody what you've done, what your portfolio looked like, and so on. Before I forget, better shut down my phone. Had that mistake happen before.
Make sure you hit record. I've made that mistake many
Oh,
times.
damn
At
it.
least once.
I've done that twice already. Well, actually, technically, I've only done it once. The second time was Kenny Wolf.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I told him, let's do a podcast. And he said, yeah, sure. Come to my studio and we'll record it. And then he's got a whole setup with chairs and everything. We set up the camera. He clicks the record. We sit down. We go through the whole thing. And then we come back to the end. He goes, oh, I got a phone call in the middle. And it stopped the recording. It's like,
oh, no.
So, yeah.
That's a terrible feeling. At least you were both, you didn't have to apologize to him.
Yeah. So, but I did have at least one that was all my fault.
Yeah, I got 20. The one time I did it, I got 20 minutes in and I'm just like, oh shit, I forgot to hit record. So we had to start all over again. But luckily I caught it before it was over.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to count us down now. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to the Multifamily Operators Podcast. This is Joseph Goslan, your host, and today we have Brian Hamrick with us. Brian, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, Joseph, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. We start every podcast with our guests introducing themselves, telling our audience a little bit about themselves and what they've done. Take it.
Thank you. Well, my name is Brian Hamrick. My company is Hamrick Investment Group, and we invest in residential apartments. We have 370 units here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I also invest in self-storage, performing and non-performing notes, office, and we're just about to start a 120-unit development, 120-unit apartment unit development here in Grand Rapids. I asset manage over 32 million in value, and I'm just excited to be here and talk about operating my real estate.
Awesome, man. Congratulations on the new project. I haven't heard about that one. We'll dive into it a little bit later. So one of the things that we've always liked to ask our guests is how they run their operations, right? Are you self-managing? Are you using a third party? Which way do you guys go?
Yeah, so I made the decision early on to hire third-party property management. When I bought my first 12 unit here in Grand Rapids, there was that moment when I thought, you know what, I could do this myself. And then the more I thought about it, after about 5 minutes, I'm like, nope, I don't want to do it. I would be terrible at it. It's best if I hire a good third-party property management. I interviewed a bunch of different companies, found one that I really liked, and they helped me build my first 70-unit portfolio.
Awesome. And do they manage all your 300 plus units?
No, at some point I got to a point where the numbers just started going down. I around 2014, 2015, when I should have been making money hand over fist because rents were rising, my numbers were getting worse and worse, and I really had to dig into it with them to find out what was going on. Could not get the right answer, and I ended up moving on to a different property management company. And they now manage my entire portfolio, which is roughly 370 units.
Gotcha, and you're on the second one. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that one. So what are you looking for when you hire a third-party property management? Well, what was your criteria? What is important to you? How do you make that decision?
So what I'm at its very basic core, you're looking for someone to add to your team who's really going to bring value to your team. And to me, managing those properties, managing those units, I want someone who knows how to manage the type of units that I already own. Most of my units, all of my units are at least 40 to 100 years old here in Grand Rapids. So I want someone who understands how to do that. I was looking at the time when I moved on to the second property management company, I was looking to grow my portfolio to buy larger apartment complexes. So I specifically chose a company that manages larger apartment complexes, as well as the smaller multifamilies, because I have everything from duplexes all the way up to a 207 unit apartment community. What's very important to me is that they have an on-staff maintenance team, because what I found is that when companies sub out their maintenance work, you don't get that special attention that you do if the maintenance company works for your property management company, because they will go, and if they are there to fix one thing, say the stove isn't working, and they see that there's a leak in the tub, they're going to fix that as well. If it's a sub, that doesn't always happen. They might write it up and say, hey, you need to look at this, but then you got to send someone back out at a different time.
Yeah, because the maintenance guy knows he's going to get a phone call at 2 a.m. and he doesn't want to take that call, right?
Right,
So
let's head it off
while
at
it's
the
out there.
pass.
Exactly. Plus, you also have the financial side of things, right? If they sub and you sub, then now you have to pay profit margins twice.
Right. So the more we can keep those maintenance expenses down and get it all with one fell swoop, the better the bottom line is going to look.
Got it.
To continue, I got a couple more things. One is the leasing is very important. How quickly can they release units, turn the units, market those units to get the best quality tenants? And then also the accounting systems. What's the software management system that they're using? The company that I work with, Green Property Management, they use AppFolio. Mm-hmm. And I really like that. It's real time. I am able to go in, I could look at it right now online and see exactly how my properties are performing today. What's the occupancy? What's the delinquency? What are the bills that are being paid? And I have real-time access to that, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's much better than somebody uploading a statement at the end of the month, and by then it's kind of like too late to react to anything.
Yeah, exactly. I want to know, I don't want to know 40 days after the fact or 30 days after the fact. I want to know at least, weekly. Yeah. But real time is the best way.
Awesome. So how do you work with that third-party property management? Do you talk to them daily, weekly, monthly? Who do you talk to at the property management company? Give us a little bit of an insight of how do you work with them?
Well, so the company that Green Property Management, who manages all my properties here in Grand Rapids, I work with them on a pretty consistent basis. I wouldn't say daily, but at times I've worked with them daily when we take over a property and there's always something going on. I'll work with them daily. Preferably, it might be monthly. We have a monthly meeting about our properties, go over the numbers. Talk about the budget for the next month or several months. What does the rent roll look like? How do we get occupancy up? So we do have those monthly meetings. And then I can call anyone in the company. If I have a maintenance question, I can get a hold of the maintenance guy. If I have a leasing question, I can either send an email or call the leasing agent at the property. So it's a consistent communication, but we only have one monthly meeting scheduled.
Gotcha. Okay, so basically mostly ad hoc with a monthly reoccurring.
Yeah, ad hoc, really just depending on where are we. Is the property stabilized and just humming along, or are we under some sort of project and we have to have constant communication about expenses and progress?
How about on-site visits? Do you do those? How often do you do those?
Yeah, so for my smaller properties, my 2 units, my 4 units, up to my 37 unit, I might go there twice a year if everything is looking good. If the numbers look good, I'll drive by the property when I'm in the area just to look and check on it. But on my larger properties, I have a 96 and a 207 unit with them as well. I'm going there at least once a month because I want to walk the grounds. I want to walk through the interior. I want to see, how is it being kept up? Does it look clean, presentable? Do I see any issues that might crop up? And, it just gives me the opportunity as well to take photos for my investors so that they can see, okay, this is what the property looks like as of a week ago.
Yeah. And what you're mentioning kind of resonates with my personal experience is the bigger the property, the more attention it needs. So there's more often conversations, there's more often looking at the budget and tracking the numbers, and there's more often on-site visits. And then the smaller ones, especially the 2s and 3s and 4s, those barely get any attention. But again, that's also because they usually have less turnovers and less fluctuations over the years.
Yeah, and also if you just look at them as individual businesses, your 2-unit is really not that big a business in the whole scheme of things. But if you have a 96-unit apartment complex, well, now you have a multi-million-dollar business, and you have to pay a lot more attention to that.
Yep, absolutely. So you mentioned that you switched to property management company, and we had to go through something very similar at some point. What are those benchmarks that you were tracking in order to recognize, like, wait a second, something is not going well? And what were the questions you didn't get the right answers to?
The questions were, why are my maintenance expenses getting so much higher? Why is our eviction rate increasing? Why is it that our rents are not increasing when we're in 2014, 2015, rents were skyrocketing?
Yeah.
You know, so why am I not benefiting from that as well? And why can't you answer my question in the first place? I wasn't getting good answers. And this was a company that helped me build my original portfolio. And I really wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, I just wasn't getting the answers. The numbers weren't improving. My net profit was decreasing. And there was no reasonable explanation why. And I just realized, you know what, as tough as it is, I need to make a switch. And I'm glad I did, because as soon as I moved over to the new property management company, which is Green Property Management Company, they turned it around within 6 months. I was back making the same, if not better, profit than I had been earlier.
Yeah, and I think there's a really good lesson in there. That's a lesson that I learned also the hard way. Is there's some kind of an emotional attachment to the first company that you work with, and in many cases they were there and taught us a lot of things and held our hand through a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And if the numbers are not working out and they can't improve and they don't do enough to try to improve, you got to cut your losses as soon as you can. So I would give an advice, and you tell me what you think about that, is put a clock on it, right? As soon as the conversations are starting and you see that things are not going the direction you want to go, I would tell the property management company, okay, you have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the comfort level you have with them, right? And put a clock on it so you can track it. And then at that date, you got to cut. I ended up doing that, but it took me a little bit too long to get to that point, and I regret not doing that sooner.
Well, there's a cost to switching management companies. It's not like you can just fire them and then immediately start up with someone else. When I switched from my previous management company, I had to pay out the leases. I had to pay out what they would have made on the leases that they had put in place. And that cost me about $10,000 right there. So that's a big cost that you kind of have to psychologically overcome and say, well, not only am I firing them, but I'm also paying them $10,000 out of my pocket contractually. And then there's the emotional cost. You feel an obligation to them because they had, if you were in a good enough situation with your management company that you had to manage multiple properties, it sounds like. Yep. And that's because at one point they were doing a very good job for you. And so you feel that obligation to respect and honor that relationship. But at some point, you're right, it is business and you have to take that emotion out of it.
Yeah. Well, one more lesson is don't create contracts that make you pay if you have to fire them.
Yeah, I mean, look at your management contract, and they're putting tenants in. I had to respect that because they put tenants in place for, say, 12 months, and they expected to make their 8% or 10% or whatever they were making over that 12-month period. So
That might be a Michigan thing. That's not how we do business in Texas.
Yeah, you guys are totally different in Texas.
You know, if you're not performing, I'm gonna fire you, right? And I'm not gonna pay you for non-performance. That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But okay. So a lot of the people we talk to have either transitioned already or plan on transitioning to self-management at some point. Is that something you've considered? Is that something on your radar at all? Or is that something you say, I'll never do that?
No, I will never do that. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't want the headache. I don't want to have employees. I control $32 million in assets. It doesn't mean I own 32 million. It means I control it. I have investors, I have lenders, but I'm a one-man band. I don't have employees. I work out of my home office, and I have a reasonable lifestyle where I can spend time on the weekends with my family. I can spend, I have dinner with my family every night. I'm not constantly at work, even though I am constantly working. I think I'm not constantly at work having to worry about what my employees are doing. I much prefer, even though I know I'm leaving money on the table, I much prefer to hire, third-party management companies, contractors. I prefer to have strategic rock star partners in all my different endeavors who do a lot of the heavy lifting and in some cases have their own staff and employee. But I very intentionally set up my life to not have that stress and headache of having to build and employ people, build a team and employ people that I then am responsible for.
I can totally respect that, and we've held off as long as we could. But for us and a lot of the people we spoke with, it's never about money. You're right that the brain damage property management brings to the table is not worth the money it generates, because it's not a profit center for us. But it does allow us to have a lot more control. So yeah, there's a trade-off there. We'll talk when you hit 1,500 units, and I'd love to revisit that question with you. But for now, I totally understand where you're coming from. I was there as well, and we were cornered into setting up our own property management company, basically.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were in a situation where you had to fire your previous one, and you probably could not find someone who would do it as well as you would expect it to be done.
That's exactly what it was, right? We fired our second one, and then we said, okay, instead of taking another gamble on the third one, we're just going to bite the bullet and do it ourselves.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the brain damage, and that's exactly what I want to avoid. So, but yeah, kudos to you for pulling it together.
Yeah. So as an asset manager, we don't get down all the way to the daily operation of the property, right? But there's always the ability to influence from the outside. One of the things that I like to ask is, when you come in and you guys do value add projects, right?
Yes.
So the goal in a value add project is come in, buy an underperforming property, increase income, reduce expenses, and kind of make the property value a lot more than either refi or sell, whatever the strategy is. We ask the same questions over and over to our experienced operators because we always learn new things, right? And that's what this podcast is all about, is helping new operators and experienced operators learn new methods and new ideas. So on the income side of things, we'll get to the expense in a minute, but on the income side of things, other than the normal increase rent or implement utility chargebacks, what are the kind of things that you guys like to do that either generates new income stream or increase the income in existing line items?
Well, you took away my big one, which is utility chargebacks. But I do want to say something about that, because for the longest time, a lot of the properties I invest in here do not have split utilities, both on the smaller level, and then the 96 unit we bought does not have split utilities. So we are paying that. And for the longest time, we thought, well, we'll just eat the cost of that and charge a higher rent to compensate for it. But within the past 2 years, we've decided, no, let's do a utility charge back, because the resident, they separate that in their mind. They know that if they go somewhere else, they're going to pay utilities separately. So we should also charge them separately. So anyone who is listening to this, who is not doing RUBS, resident utility bill back system, you should highly consider it, because it will bring more money in, and also help offset those utility costs. So even, I know that that's a typical one, but I did have to change my mindset on that. Things that we do are anytime we can get additional fees for like parking. Parking has now become, because some of our properties are near downtown. We know of some units where people are paying $150 a month to have parking. So we have kind of monetized our parking in some respects. In the case of our 96 unit, we've included it in that RUBS fee. So it's, even though it's not technically a utility, it's more like a resort type fee. It's going to include your parking. A lot of these, our 96 unit is 7 stories tall. And when we bought it, you'd see a lot of those air conditioning units hanging outside the window. Mm-hmm. And we banned those. So you cannot have an air conditioning unit in the window. What we do allow them to do is rent from us for $50 a month, a high efficiency, like floor air conditioning unit that vents out the window.
Gotcha.
So it's got a little vent, but it sits on the floor. And that has brought in some additional income. We have instituted a system that really is more deliberate about when on move out, the turnover costs, and how much of that can we bill back to the resident, get out of their security deposit. And you have to be somewhat deliberate about that, because it's very easy to just say, oh, well, we spent $200 for paint. We'll deduct that from your security deposit. No, we go through and we itemize everything, whether it's blinds, doorknobs, things like that, and add that up to be deducted from their security deposit.
Yeah, we do exactly the same thing. We have a price sheet, right? And that says this is how much you charge for the blinds and the flooring and the carpet cleaning and so on. And we actually give that to the resident as part of the lease package, so they'll know when they get out what they're going to get charged for. So, yeah, and a lot of people don't realize, but the other income line items are really, really significant in the multifamily world, because, when you have a duplex, a 2-unit, and, you have a resident leave every 3 years, it seems insignificant. But when you have 96 units, and let's just say only 20 of them decide to rent the $50 a month AC that you offer, that's $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. And with whatever cap rate you guys are running at, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to the property value, just because you offer that service. So these are really
I got another big one you just made me think of.
Go for it.
Laundry. So on my smaller units, up to my 37 unit, I've purchased the laundry machines, the coin operated commercial laundry machines. And that income really helps improve our bottom line and our net operating income, and therefore the value of the property. Now on that same 96 unit, we inherited a 10-year laundry contract where we're getting half, roughly half the income, but someone else owns the machines and is maintaining the machines for us. I'd love to get your opinion on this, but I'm seriously considering purchasing 8 washer and dryer units to just replace the contract that we have when it comes due at the beginning of next year.
Yeah, so we have properties with both leased or owned, and on one hand, there's pros and cons both ways, right? On one hand, you get to collect the income, but you also are responsible for the maintenance of the machines and the dryers. And, if anything breaks, you got to make sure somebody comes out and fix it and bear the costs. And every few years, you're going to have to replace the machines, upgrade the machines, and so on. On the other hand, when you're the one signing the contract with the usually in Texas, it's called CoinMac, right? Or SDS or any one of those service providers. they'll give you a very big upfront bonus. When you do the math, that upfront bonus is good for a few years, right? So you really have to, they make it very attractive. They also tell you you'll get a piece of the action. But my experience in talking to other operators, that piece is usually very, very minimal compared to what you could have. So I'd say look at the property, look at the history, what they collect versus what you'll have in your pocket when you give it away to an operator. And that's where the decision factor is made, right? If the operator gives you enough upfront fee to cover for the next 10 years or the next 5 years and you plan on selling in 3, go with the operator, right? But if what they're gonna give you is gonna be half of what you can make on your own, it might be worth spending the money and getting the machines.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. Thanks. I know on our 207 unit, when we signed that contract, they gave us $45,000.
There you go.
And for a 10-year contract. So that's not bad. It's nice to have that money in your pocket up front.
Well, the question is, what would you get monthly, right, from the machines on a 207 unit, right? If you get $1,000 or $2,000, that means they paid for 2.5 years up front.
Yeah, and that's about right. That's about how the math worked out.
Yeah. So, and again, sometimes you need that upfront money. Sometimes you already budgeted the capex to buy the machine, so might as well just buy the machine and run with it, right? Pros and cons depends on your exit strategy, on your hold strategy, on the financial situation you're in.
Yeah. I agree. That. So, and one other income item can be rooftop income. When we bought our 96 unit, there was rooftop income in place from a T-Mobile cell tower.
Okay.
Which went away shortly after we bought it, unfortunately. But there's that type of income to look into too. But you need a good attorney. The cellular companies will come to you and say, "Hey, we'd like to locate a tower on your building." Is
that a high rise?
It's a 7-story, so it's one of the taller buildings in its area.
Okay. Well, so that's very specific to like core urban areas. When you have high rises and mid rises, one thing that might work in your environment is also air rights, right? That's very common in very, very expensive areas like Manhattan, right? If you have a 7-story, you can sell the air rights so somebody can put a double the size high rise next to you and they'll pay you for it. So that's definitely another interesting opportunity when you're in those urban environments and you have tall buildings.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, so let's take a look at the other side of the equation, right? Because when we value multifamily, everybody knows the formula is NOI divided by cap rate equals the value. NOI is income less expenses. So every dollar we increase in income and every dollar we reduce in expenses are equal in the way they add or subtract from the property value. So increase in income by $2, but it creates $4 worth of expenses is actually reducing the property value. So what do you guys like to do when it comes to a new property you take over to maximize efficiency of operations? How can you reduce expenses, cut expenses, change the way you do things that they're no longer impacting your OPEX? What do you guys like to do?
Well, one thing we've done is an energy efficiency audit where we hire a company to go through, look at all of the systems that are in place. In Michigan, we have gas forced air furnaces, HVAC systems. In some of the older properties, we have hot water heat boiler systems. So we'll do a utility audit to see, okay, how are those systems running? What kind of money can we spend to make them more efficient or replace them? What's our payback on that? We'll look at the building envelope itself, the windows. Do we need to put storms up? Some of my buildings are in historic areas and I can't replace these old windows that are leaky and drafty, but we can put storms up. And in fact, we're doing that right now as we speak. And that will have a huge effect on the bottom line, saving on those utility costs, because your biggest expenses are going to be property tax, which you can fight. but you won't always win. Your insurance, which you can always try to get the best bids on insurance, but utilities are a huge ticket item, and that's really going to be the best place to look to find those savings. Find all the leaks in the building. If you have a lot of units, all those little leaks really add up. And the more you can stay on top of those, the more you're going to save. So I think utilities is big. Decreasing tenant turnover, very important, because someone was just dropped this information on me today, but the average cost nationally to turn over a unit is $4,100. And I thought about that. I'm like, well, we don't usually spend that much, but when you consider the downtime, and if it takes a month or more to lease it out, well, that vacancy is costing you money too. So reducing that.
Yeah, that's a lot of things that people don't realize, right? So turning a unit is not just how much you pay to paint it or to clean the carpet, right? It's everything. It's the time the maintenance guy is going to be there. It's the materials. It's the time the leasing agent is going to have to spend on marketing the unit and showing prospects and doing tours, and then work the application process and the screening fees that you're going to get charged. And then that period of lost income is also something that costs you, right? So we always advocate to do the math before you tell an existing resident to move out because you want higher rent, is what you're going to gain versus what you're going to lose.
Exactly. Yeah. So the more you can decrease that, the better.
So that's a really good thing. And that's a common thread we hear from all the great operators we talk to. What do you guys do in order to increase retention?
Tenant appreciation events, or maybe gift cards. In one of our buildings, we actually have a restaurant, so we pass out gift cards quite regularly. When it comes time to the end of someone's lease, we will contact them 60 to 90 days before that lease ends to say, hey, do you intend to stay? We really want you to stay. How can we make it so that you do stay? And we'll offer small perks, like if they want a wall painted, if they've been there for a while and they need new carpet or something, a new appliance, we'll do whatever we can up to a certain amount. We don't want to, overspend, but we will spend to keep them in that unit so we don't have those turnover costs.
Yeah, and that's the kind of things that we always encourage our team to look at. It's like, if that carpet is destroyed and they move out, we're going to have to replace it anyways. So it's not like you're spending money to keep them in. You would have spent that money anyways if they moved out.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. So spend it while they're there and they're still paying their rent.
Exactly. We offer a carpet cleaning service, right? Somebody will come and clean the carpet if they have a carpet, an appliance, new ceiling fans, whatever we can in order to keep them in, and especially things that we know we're going to have to do anyways if they move out. That makes the most sense for us. Okay. Any creative ideas that you guys have been trying to do in the COVID environment? Because we used to do pool parties and all this kind of events, but we can't do those anymore, right? So in terms of client appreciation or retention promotions, what do you guys do in the Corona environment?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's sort of changed everything. You can't have like a pizza party in the lobby or anything like that. Definitely communication has been key, but as far as showing appreciation, gift cards, we still do that. Addressing service calls as soon as possible. For a while there when we were in quarantine, and we're not anymore, service calls really kind of had to be put on the back burner unless it was an emergency. But I think just staying on top of the service calls, making sure the tenant can get a hold of you and communicate with your management company when they need you, that's very important.
Yeah, that's great. So another common question we ask all of our guests is, if you could go back 10, 20 years back and talk to younger Brian, what advice would you give yourself? And then let's assume you can tell yourself that 2009 would be the bottom. Buy anything you can put your hands on, right? what lessons you learned along the way that you would love to pass on to younger Brian?
Find those strategic partners. Find those other individuals who will help you take your game to a higher level. I've been lucky to find strategic partners in the multifamily apartment space. I've found a strategic partner, several partners in the self-storage space who really know that area, and I can invest with them. I bring something to the table as well, but I can partner with them. And in the performing and non-performing note space, I also have a strategic partner in that. And that has just, starting out, often as an investor, you have to decide what path are you going to take. And I think the more you can find those people who are really good at what they do that you can partner with or work alongside with, the faster you're going to be able to go down that path and start branching out into other directions.
Yeah.
So it's all about the people you surround yourself with.
That's a really great advice. We've heard it in a different way. Find a mentor, right? But it's find a partner, find someone that knows what they're doing that you want to do, and partner with them, bring value to them. That's really a common thread we see with all the great operators. So I really like that advice.
Yeah. Now I like the mentor part, but I don't put too much emphasis on that because I think there's all kinds of great mentors. I think people just listening to your podcast, Joseph, are getting mentorship from you and your guests. And now in the age of podcasting, when I started, we didn't have the podcast. We had to pay $5,000, $10,000 for this kind of conversation.
Yes.
But in the age of podcasts, there's so much great information out there. And I know there are a lot of people doing the training and the mentorship, and all that can be very helpful. But if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to spend $10,000 on a mentor who's going to get me from A to Z, no, I mean, you've got to figure out how to do it yourself. And the quickest way to get there is to partner with someone and bring value to them in the process.
Yeah. And I've always been asked, like, well, how can I find a mentor? Or what can I offer a mentor? Because there's a lot of people that will reach out and say, well, will you be my mentor? I'll do whatever you want. It's kind of like, what do you mean whatever I want, right? It's kind of like, what do you have to bring to the table? Why would I spend my time helping you? And this is where I've taken a lot of calls from a lot of new people that just wanted, and I still do to today. But I figured for me, the most efficient way is this podcast, having conversation with experienced operators, asking similar questions so our audience can hear the different opinions and the different approaches and the different ideas, right? You're the first one that has a mid-rise. So the whole idea of rooftop income, still, it's the first time it came up on our podcast. But
all right, score one for me.
there you go. No, but the idea of, because I talk to a lot of different operators from different parts of the country, then our listeners can get value and knowledge about all those different things. Like you said, and all they have to spend is time listening on iTunes. We don't charge anything for that. It's free for everybody. And I found this vehicle as a way of dispersing not just my knowledge, but other people's knowledge in a mass platform instead of one phone call at a time.
Yeah, I agree. I host a podcast too, and you've been a guest on it. I think if someone is serious about getting your mentorship and they call you, well, they better have listened to your podcast because a lot of what they want to gain from you, you're sharing for free, weekly or monthly or however often your podcast comes out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to be conscious of your time. You've brought a lot of value. I just mentioned the fact that you have all those things that a lot of our previous guests didn't have was a huge value. If our listeners want to reach out and maybe invest in one of your deals, ask any questions, how can they find you? And we'll obviously put everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So my website is higinvestor.com. That's HIG investor.com. HIG is short for Hamrick Investment Group. And you can listen to my podcast. It's called the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. And we've have well over 250 episodes, over 1 million listens, and we're almost 5 years in.
That's phenomenal. And yes, absolutely. Go listen to that podcast. I was a guest on it. I listened to quite a few, not all 250, but quite a few of your episodes, and really, really great value comes out of those things.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. You got a lot of catching up to do.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, Brian, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you want to listen more from experienced operators, our website is aptopr.com. You can find us on iTunes, Teachers, SoundCloud, and now even on Amazon. We're there. We'll appreciate any review you can give us, 1 star, 5 stars, whatever works for you. We'll appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.